Hi, this is Carey Martell, editor for the Yamhill Advocate. And what I'm uploading here is a video which has, I think it's about 15-minute segment, maybe 17-minute segment, somewhere in that area. It's a part where I ask some questions of Elise Hollamon and Jeri Turgeson about the wellness center operating in the Newberg High School. The questions here particularly relate to what they define as gender-affirming care, anti-racist, and trauma-informed care. So I've added subtitles and I've tried to boost the audio because the audio wasn't great in the original. So I think these subtitles are accurate for what they were saying. If they're not, apologies, because it sounds like what they were saying based upon this audio as I recall. So don't think I've taken anybody out of context. I'm sure they'll let me know if they think they have. So, has this always been policy since the wellness center was open?
Yes, this has been consistent with, I think, I guess to be right, we have not had medical providers on site.
But this is the entire policy that's always been in place since.
This is, yeah.
So, as you know, on the Yamhill Advocate, I've published a variety of screenshots came from some threads in a group called Progressive Mental that several members of this panel are part of. And there was a conversation in there that was related to this. I'm looking for clarity on what was meant. So, I believe it was posted last fall. Posted by Elise Hollamon that says, "Want to make sure people are aware of this. Providence Behavioral Health support students and teachers on site through the Wellness Center at Newberg High School. We are here for all your kids and teachers. Anything we can do. Hollamon has tagged wellness, community wellness collective Facebook page, as well as the Facebook profiles for Stoller and Jeri Turgeson. Stoller being co-founder of collective Turgeson, listed and shown on the website as mentioned in this panel, supervising the provider of wellness for the Newberg Public Schools and clinical lead for Providence Medical Group Behavioral Health. Stoller replied to Hollamon's post by writing, "Yes, we do." Turgeson replied to Hollamon's post with, "Yes, trauma-informed, anti-racist, gender-affirming care, Providence Behavioral Health and Wellness Center are steadfast in these values. Please reach out and let us know what we can do." So my question is, gender-affirming care, how do you define that exactly? Most people define it as the treatment of gender dysphoria, but you're saying that that's something that you guys don't do at all.
That's a great question, and thank you so much for bringing it up. So I think first, I am a community member. I do live in this community, and the work that I have always done in the Wellness Center of Providence is with my Providence hat on. Really thinking about the time around when that post was made, we had a number of students who were tagged in an app that was making, racism became a really difficult topic. And I think everyone in this room probably has a different perspective around racism and the extent of racism and whether it is present or not and the impact that it has on our kids. The frame that I have maintained is that if we have a student that comes in that reports that they are experiencing racist bullying or racist treatment, then that is something that we're going to support them in, that we're going to affirm them in that experience, we're going to help them find a safe staff member so that they can have a conversation so that they can feel safe in their school. If a student similarly, if they comes in with any identity marker, that's something that we're going to want to incorporate. If they come in and say, "My Christian faith is really important to me, my Latin heritage is something that's really important to me," that's going to be a component of their identity that we're going to want to affirm as part of therapy. When we talk about really specifically gender-affirming care, it's creating a safe, affirming space that conversion therapy is illegal. That is not something that we do. We want them to feel safe in our environment so that we can have conversations, sometimes difficult conversations, bring families in so that they can feel supported with their family and help the family identify. And Tony brought up a really great case. Help the family identify what they need as a family unit to feel supported in dealing with some of these difficult conversations. We've never prescribed on site. We haven't had a medical team, so this has been the approach that we've had for the past 5 years.
I mentioned gender conversion treatment. It was gender affirming treatment. It's not treating for gender dysphoria, and you don't do complex psychiatric.
Our goal is to be an affirming environment we're not doing gender-affirming medical treatment.
For what you said.
I can say that we're doing gender-affirming medical care. We're providing an affirming space.
Yeah.
We're providing an affirming space.
You mean on the I think it's important, Carey, to remember too, though, that where we are today, and you very well know, versus where we were then, gender-affirming care was not a hot-button word. Gender-affirming care is widely used in medical practice across the country. There's a difference between the environment of affirming a child, or like she said, any identity, and prescribing gender-affirming hormone therapy.
I understand that you can include hormone therapy doesn't necessarily need to include that. But it's just the treatment of gender dysphoria, which is a normal psychiatric condition, which most people consider to be a complex psychiatric condition, which you say you don't treat for. You say it's fine.
When we say treatment, we're meaning medication. So that is that and it's a good reminder to people in healthcare that not what we know as what a definition of the word is not always what the community knows as a definition of the word. So I will take that to heart, and treatment to us means prescribing a medication or a procedure.
Okay, so before we continue, since we're having now a semantical argument about whether gender-affirming care meaning the same thing as treatment and if they have distinct differences, there's an article from WebMD which has been medically reviewed by Isabel Lau, who is a medical doctor, recently, February 24th, 2022. Gender affirmation care refers to treatments ranging from surgery to speech therapy that support a transgender or non-binary person in their gender transition. Okay? Again, gender affirmation care refers to treatments because not all treatments require the prescription of drugs. In fact, most therapy does not involve the prescription of drugs. It doesn't. It involves therapy, which is a treatment. And the creation of a gender-affirming environment is a form of therapy that's part of gender-affirming care, and therapy is a treatment. You see where I'm going with this? Okay. Let's continue down the article so we can see this. Okay? Voice communication therapy. Again, train you how to better conform with your gender identity by changing the pitch of your voice, how quickly you speak, how loudly you speak. Mental health care. You face many issues when you establish a new identity. Should you get sex reassignment surgery? How do you mentally prepare for the change? Yada, yada. That's part of treatment. Okay? This is treatment. Reproductive counseling. Treatment. It's a treatment. Okay. Let's move on.
On that note, since it was also mentioned, what was meant by anti-racist?
I just spoke to that as far as like a child coming in who has concerns.
I'm sorry.
The piece that I just spoke about around a child coming in saying that they have experienced like racist bullying or reporting that they've experienced racism, that's something that I'm going to hear them and heard that experience and help connect them with a safe adult so they feel safe in their school to have a conversation about that. We really want to look at meaningful identity markers like Christian faith, Latin heritage, and who are you as an individual so we can support you as a whole human with those identity markers that are really important.
What was the definition of trauma?
Oh, that's a really great question. Trauma-informed considerations for healthcare, I think really looking at the impact of adverse childhood experiences in an individual's life. So there's some really great research around adverse childhood experiences that start early in life. Many of us, they're more common than not, have had these. So looking at things like family separation, abuse or neglect in the home, parental divorce, having a parent that has an emotional health condition, having a parent who maybe has a substance use condition. We know that these are significant concerns that impact a family, and there's really amazing literature around how having those adverse childhood experiences can go on to impact an individual's physical health and emotional health later on in life. And so really what the goal of trauma-informed care is how do I look at you as a whole human and the context and the lived experiences that you have had and take those into consideration so that I'm putting together a treatment plan that supports all of those components and then also approaching that individual in a way that is responsive to prior adverse experiences that they've had.
How is it different than other types of anxiety? I'm confused.
I just want to let everybody know, we do have other slides besides this one, so as we go, maybe start wrapping up some of these questions or some of the scenarios.
But I do think it's actually fair to answer some of these questions because I think some of the posts that you've made have led to some feelings in the room that I think we should air out as a community, and especially me as a leader. You know, I've said to you twice and to anyone in the room that I welcome anyone to give me a phone call, an email. I have not had that from you. There's been lots shared, and I would be happy to have that conversation. I feel this way about both sides of the aisle, to be clear. Both sides of the aisle have created harm and hurt, and I'm trying to do my very best to come to the middle and have a true dialogue of how can I help bridge the pain that we're in. I don't believe healing can happen until reconciliation happens. Part of reconciliation is admitting that you have a piece in the fault. I am happy to do that right now.
I'm not really looking to have a debate. I'm just looking for clarity on what the term is meant by trauma-informed, how it's different from normal types of anxiety treatment.
Well, okay, but I also think that it's important that all of us have a lot. All of us are trying to come to the table, and I want, when you're pulling up tweets or Facebook comments that were made a year ago, that's pretty difficult, and we're willing to entertain that because we really do care, and I actually want you to hear from me the truth behind those comments. But I don't feel like we can move forward as a community until we move forward. And I feel like as a panel, we're making that statement.
Mr. Martell, could you speak up?
What? Sorry.
Mr. Martell, Facebook is asking for you to speak a little louder, please.
I just hear, I understand what you're saying. Are you saying that you want to debate the content of our newspaper?
No.
Instead of just answering a simple question of what trauma-informed care means and how it's different than standard types of anxiety treatment to warrant a special category?
No, we're happy to answer the questions. I was just responding to you, printing out the comments from Rebecca Yamhill.
Printing out to one make sure I got it right.
Okay. Go for it.
Did we answer the trauma-informed care or something?
Yeah, so trauma-informed care is not in and of itself a theory, and it's not singling out a specific group or providing like a specific accommodation, I think, or a diagnosis. Adverse childhood experiences are very common. They are more normal than not. And so it's really approaching healthcare, all of healthcare, from a frame that takes into consideration an individual's context and their lived experience so that we can provide them the best care possible, given the pieces that make them who they are.
We had a question over here.
Yeah.
I'll leave. Thank you.
Thank you.
Behind Sylvia, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just a minute, draw my question statement.
So, at this point, I want to talk about why I'm asking these questions. I'm asking the question about gender-affirming care because I don't agree with the claim that the word care and the word treatment are not the same thing within the medical field. They mean the same thing. Universally, that's what mainstream is, right? I mean, you go to get medical care at a hospital, and they're not making you feel better about your feelings. They're treating your injuries, okay? So what they're suggesting is that they have special, unique definitions for words that are used commonly throughout the medical field, such as gender-affirming care, that are very unique and nobody else uses. And I'm sorry, I don't believe that's true. I think that they meant gender-affirming care exactly the same way everybody else who uses the term means it. Furthermore, let's talk about, is there really truly a difference anyway in the term care and treatment within the context of psychological counseling of somebody who has gender dysphoria, which is what transgenderism is. Because the medical term for it is gender dysphoria, or body's a type of body dimorphism, basically. Similar to anorexia, or something like bigorexia, something of that nature. Anyway, the point here is that, is there really a tangible difference? Is there really a significant difference between the word care and treatment within this primarily psychological context here? And I don't think that there is. Okay, I think it means the exact same thing, and I think that they know that because they are indeed experienced professionals in this field, and they should know better. So, let's see. Now let's talk about anti-racist. Okay, the statement that she's made, I personally don't really believe it, because the thread had nothing to do with bullying of kids. That had nothing to do with it, and in fact, immediately followed up with a teacher, Chelsea Schatz, saying that she wanted to come get some treatment. Now, was Chelsea Schatz a victim of racist bullying? She is a white girl. I don't know if she's, maybe that's not fair to say, because she has her special pronouns and stuff, right? I'm trying not to make fun of them, but honestly, it's kind of silliness, okay? It's like, the thread had nothing to do with bullying in the schools. It was directed at both students and teachers to go get the counseling. I'm not sure if there are any teachers in the group, in the school system, who are anything but Caucasian. I'm going to be honest here. I'm not sure if there's even any Hispanic teachers that are in the Progressive Yamhill group that Elise was talking to. So, I really don't believe the excuse. You're free to believe it or not. It does sound somewhat plausible, but within the context of that thread, I don't think it was. Lastly, trauma-informed care. She claims that it's not a theory, and I suppose that's correct in the sense that trauma-informed care is a framework for treatment of people who have anxiety issues. As a framework, it possesses its own theories about how to do the treatment. And while I can get into this, I don't want to dive into a long dissection of the framework, but you can Google this if you like. When people read about, kids in college who need trigger warnings on everything, and nobody can clap their hands, and they need to, because it's going to set off people's triggers and stuff. That's what trauma-informed care is all about. Okay, trauma-informed care, unlike a more mainstream type of trauma-focused care. Okay, trauma-informed care comes from a place where trauma is always going to be there no matter what you do, and you can't ever get over your problems. So instead, you need to develop a bunch of coping mechanisms, like learning to identify the triggers that set you off, and then just try to avoid them everywhere. But more importantly, trauma-informed care's framework encourages you to inform other people about your triggers, and then scream bloody murder if anybody violates, your triggers and sets you off. And where you can excuse yourself and should basically avoid any situation that might place you into exposure to your triggers. That's what trauma-informed care is about. It is, I would argue it's pseudoscientific. It has absolutely no legitimate scientific basis for it as an actual effective form of treatment. For very obvious reasons, you cannot go about your normal daily life and just try to avoid anything that might set you off. You're supposed to learn how to overcome your trauma. That's the purpose of legitimate therapy, is to overcome and move past your trauma. It is not to constantly dwell about some nonsense that happened to you in the past, okay? I'm just going to say it. You got to get over it. So, there's a reason why I asked for definitions for the words trauma-informed, anti-racist, and gender-affirming care because they're really all linked the same, which is why she used them in a single sentence. No periods. Okay? Let's double check here. Yeah. All commas there. Okay? There's a reason why it was all used in a single sentence. Because the way in which they are doing the therapy is all related to critical race theory. Okay? Now, I'm sure I avoided bringing that term up because I didn't want to have a massive debate with them about it. But if it involves the belief that the United States of America is socially, economically, legally, systemically racist or prejudiced against minority groups, and that people who are part of a self-identifying minority group, whether it be ethnicity or gender identity, sexuality, various things really, are exclusively at a disadvantage compared to Caucasian heterosexuals, in particular men, because within this framework, women are considered to be a minority, even though they represent half of the human population and have since the existence of the species. They use this framework for a reason, okay? And they say these things for a reason. And there's a reason why she keeps repeating the word lived experiences, okay? There's a reason for this. And the reason is because she is filtering her therapy practice with these kids through the lens of critical race theory. And that's why I was trying to get her to give the definitions. And she basically told you, if you know what you're looking for, okay, if you understand what all this Orwellian doublespeak word salad is supposed to mean. What it means is that instead of a more standard type of anxiety therapy treatment, where the child is encouraged to overcome their hardships and to not make things like gender identity an important identity marker in their life that dictates over everything, and to not make traumatic experiences in their life an identity marker that's going to dictate their entire future for the rest of their lives. To not use things like trigger warnings and coping mechanisms that are really just avoidance techniques, okay? To avoid being placed into a situation which will supposedly trigger trauma. What it does is it teaches victimhood. It teaches that you are always this thing, this cluster of identity markers, if you will, to use her term, and you are always a perpetual victim as a result. So everybody else in your life needs to walk on eggshells. They need to donate money to you. They, if they're a privileged higher person in the pecking order of discrimination, you know, of suffering, if you will, if you're farther down on the ladder than somebody else, then they have to make way for you to cause a balance, an equity balance of the scales. It's a very dangerous ideology to be teaching to children because it distracts them away from more meaningful accomplishment and things that are healthier, mentally healthier to establish an identity upon. Building your identity around sexual fetishes, okay, is not healthy. Building your identity solely or largely even around your ethnic group, not very healthy, okay? We know that from many historical experiences, you know? The one people often like to throw around is Nazism, okay? It's not healthy to base a significant portion of your personal identity around ethnic heritage and create this whole us versus them mentality. It's very unhealthy, okay? It's not the common humanity approach that used to be taught here in the Newberg school system, where people are supposed to not judge people largely by these ethnic markers, these identity markers of esoteric things, some, you know, self-designed things like fetishes, all right? Come on, people want to say that being gay is something you're born with. There's really no evidence of that, okay? So let's just put that aside. If people want to be gay, they can be gay, okay? My point is, don't build your identity around sex. It's a bad idea. It's not healthy, okay, for anybody, whether you're heterosexual or not. they're encouraging a very destructive mindset that doesn't help people. It's never been proven long-term to actually address these significant psychoses, like a gender dysphoria, someone who identifies as transgender. It doesn't address these things, which is why they have a very low life expectancy of around 32, 33 years old, okay? Because even when they do have this gender-affirming care, even when they do get all the drugs and all the surgeries, they still end up killing themselves, usually, or severely regretting, the detransitioning movement that's now just become this huge thing, because so many young kids were led astray by people like this who affirmed their identity all the time instead of just giving them some proper therapy. I mean, hey, let's compare it to something else, right? If you have a child who believes that they are Jesus Christ, they are identifying, their identity marker has been built around being the Son of God, okay? Is that something you're going to affirm? Most people would say no, and I assume that everybody on that panel would say no as well. But how is that different than a boy thinking that he's a girl or vice versa, okay? How is that really different? It's not really different. They're both, in both situations, they are believing something that is literally impossible, okay? Boy does not have the genitalia of a girl, vice versa, okay? They don't have it, okay? People want to make all these little outlandish arguments about incredibly rare birth defects that simply is inapplicable to the vast majority of people who are claiming to be transgender, okay? People are not born in the wrong bodies. You're born in the body that was created in your mother's womb based upon the genetic material that was read and environmental factors like whether, your mother decided to smoke cigarettes or drink while she was pregnant. Okay, let's just be honest here, all right? Birth defects are real, but that is not the way that the human species is supposed to be, okay? So to try to say that's the super rare thing that really isn't applicable to the vast majority of people who are claiming to be transgender, that's not a good excuse. This is the problem with them being confronted with their ideas, okay? They don't have good explanations, and what they give you is a bunch of buzzword Orwellian doublespeak nonsense, and every now and then throw in lived experiences as if that's supposed to validate the ridiculousness of it all. It's not good. It's not healthy to encourage delusions, especially in young minds. It's one thing for a kid to be imaginative and playing around. It's a totally different thing for you to, as a authority figure, go out and say, oh yeah, sure, you definitely were born in the wrong body, and now we need to dramatically change your entire life, build it around this thing that you're feeling, which even though it's literally biologically impossible for you to ever become someone of the different gender, because you don't have the organs that identify, that mark you as a person of that gender. That's what it is. It's the organs. It's not this person was assigned gender at birth. No, it was recognized what organs they had, okay? So, it feels silly for me to even have to explain this, because it's something so basic that the vast majority of humans have never had to deal with this before, and it's an ideology framework that could only ever be created within the vacuum chamber of Marxist ideology that modern day first world college academia has become. It just couldn't exist outside of that environment, because then you start dealing with people that talk back to the professor, and the professor can't, bully them into submission with their ideas by giving them a bad grade and preventing them from getting the degree that they need to pursue some career later in life. In the real world, where you have somebody like me who doesn't care what you think about them, I'm going to tell you the truth, and you're going to have to deal with that truth and have a good, rational explanation for why something that is true is actually false. And good luck with that, because most people see through the BS. I see through it, and I hope that you do too. Worst of all, I think, if you look at real legitimate scientific inquiry into the human mind is much stronger inherently than they're giving it credit for. This idea that some terrible thing that happened to your life is going to hold sway completely over identity, it's a terrible and wholly inaccurate thing to suggest. Our ancestors went through literally fighting all of nature, guys, okay? 250,000 years of it, okay? Children, half time, kid getting born dead, okay? Dying of some sort of bacteria infection, mom dying of a bacteria infection, just from giving birth. Birth was scary and hard, okay? And people constantly overcame famines, wars, freaking wolves and hyenas and lions and bears, constantly murdering parts of, members of your family. Deer hunting was dangerous. Fishing was dangerous, okay? Everything was freaking dangerous. And all of our ancestors overcame all of that stuff so that we could exist today in our little comfort bubble, called modern day technology. Nobody has to go hunt for their own food. Nobody has, for the most part, at least here in the United States, you have to worry about warring tribes coming over and trying to, steal everything from you the next day. Everybody getting conscripted into fighting a war with melee weapons like swords and pole arms, and literally riding on horses to clash into hordes of people and chop their heads off with a sword. Like, the things our ancestors went through, the vast majority of people living today in the United States, they have no parallel for. So you're trying to suggest to me that all of our ancestors had this horrible, terrible trauma that they just couldn't overcome, couldn't do anything about, and that it held sway over their destiny their entire lives, and they couldn't achieve anything, they couldn't be successful unless everybody else walked on eggshells around them? That is a foolish belief system. It is a terrible framework. It's wholly inaccurate. It is pseudoscientific. It is not supported by the historical record of our species. It's not. So what it does is it infantilizes people. It makes them think that they can't be successful in life unless they have all these little trigger warning coping mechanisms, and they're constantly sitting down with some therapist who has their own head full of problems in their lives, and quite honestly is in no position to be giving anybody else counseling on how to make a better life. And if you pay close attention to what she says, okay, she brings up things like Christian faith, being Latino, things that are, let's be honest here, okay? These are not the things a person really should build their identity around. And I know that's going to be controversial for some people to hear, but it's the truth, okay? I'll give you some examples, okay? Let's say you build your identity largely around your ethnic heritage, okay? Well, what if one day you do a DNA test, you find out that actually you're really not that ethnic group? That that has been very distressing for people who have formed their core identity largely dependent upon their ethnic identity. It's been very devastating for them. And in some cases, some people don't recover from that. Not saying that's highly normal, but there are cases where people have literally killed themselves over a 23andMe test. So, another example, religion, right? Let's say that you're Mormon, okay? And Mormon is a very strict religion. It really is. And it takes a lot of effort to be considered a good Mormon. And some people, they can't do it. And they can get shunned by their communities. Jehovah's Witnesses is like that, and various other groups, Islam. There's a lot of religions like that. Actually, if you don't hold yourself up to standard, you can be shunned by your community, and that can be extremely devastating for a person. So now I've lost my core identity being part of this religion, and things that require the constant affirmation of other people are not the thing to build an identity around, because when you lose that affirmation, you lose that identity. That's just plain facts, okay? The whole premise of all of this stuff that they're saying is that they have to affirm, they have to constantly affirm and create an artificial environment for the child in order for them to have an identity. No, that's not how this works, okay? That's not how it works in a healthy way. That's toxic. That is the most toxic thing I could possibly think of on how to form an identity, because then you are wholly dependent upon other people's perceptions of you. Some people base their worth on their physiques, right? But if you get an injury, you lose that. You can lose your legs, you can lose your arms, you can lose your eyes, you can lose your tongue, you can lose your physical functions, okay? But you know what you can never lose? You can't lose your work ethic. You can't lose your honesty. You can't lose how loyal you are to somebody else. You can't lose your integrity to anything anybody else does. You can only lose that stuff if you discard them yourself. That's the stuff that you build an identity around. That's the thing you should be. If you're a frustrated kid, that's the things that you need to focus on cultivating yourself, because those are not just the qualities nobody can take from you. Those are the qualities that everybody will respect about you and want to work with you to also be more honest, to have more loyalty, to have a harder work ethic, okay? Empires have been built by a couple poor kids from nowhere and who nobody ever thought much of, simply because they banded together and had strong work ethics and were loyal to each other and were honest in their business dealings. So, all this stuff about the identity markers, about anything other than personal virtue, it's a bunch of rubbish is what it is. What a person should base their identity around are things that you can control. And what I mean by things you can control, I mean what's literally in your head, okay? You can build your identity around virtues, how virtuous you are as a person, if you are ethical, if you are loyal, if you are brave, if you are truthful, okay? If you're honest. You can base a great identity around that stuff because that's something that you can control. You can't control how other people perceive you, but you can control what you yourself do. And that is how you build a ironclad steel trap in your brain where other people can't bully you into feeling suicidal. Because it doesn't matter what they think. What matters is what you actually do. And if you actually are a virtuous person, okay? Another example. Some people build their identity around their achievements, okay? They're very wealthy something or other, okay? What happens when you lose that wealth? Well, you can't base your identity around being super wealthy dude if you don't have the wealth, right? And that's why some people, when they lose their shirts in the stock market, they commit suicide. Some people base their identity largely around their romantic attachment to another person who's supposed to complete them. Very toxic thing to do, because should that relationship fail, that is so traumatic for so many people, they feel suicidal. They literally don't want to live without that person as part of their identity anymore. Not good. Not good. So, and that can to some extent even apply to family, as harsh as it is. I would argue kids who are coming from a dysfunctional family are at greater risk of having further distress if they base their identity around things like family and their ethnic heritage and things that can be shunned away from them by other people, things other people can take away from you, okay? I know I'm getting, kind of philosophical here, but this is really important so I can explain how destructive these ideas being taught to the kids are. They're not setting them up for long-term, and by long-term I mean the rest of their bloody lives, okay? They're not setting them up for that kind of success. They're setting them up for success that can only exist in the vacuum that is the public education system, where you have teachers who can scold and expel other kids if they bully them too much. That's not reality, okay? Reality is the downtown Portland, where if you go to the wrong neighborhood, somebody's going to stab you and steal the $20 in your pocket, okay? That's reality. That's the real world that these kids have to work through, okay? Let's be serious here, all right? This type of crap is not going to cut it. You need to have a strong, smart, worldly smarts about you. And you can't have that if you go around thinking that everybody else needs to walk on eggshells for you. If you could just avoid every terrible situation, you don't ever need to deal with a truly traumatic situation. And it's just not a good way to go about life. Basing your identity around things other people can take away from you or that you can potentially lose, bad idea. Basing your identity around ethnicity so that you have an us versus them mentality about other people, even worse, okay? Same thing with religion to some degree, all right? People can be religious, that's fine. But if your religious association can be taken away from you through no fault of your own, that's not a great thing to base your core identity around either, in my opinion. So, controversial, I know, but it's true. Anyway, I would suggest virtue-based therapy. Focus on being a person that is truly good and worthwhile and focuses on excellence, who practices excellence in your life, and you will therefore have excellence in your life. If you practice being an excellent person, you will have an excellent life. Is it going to be painless all the time? Of course not. No one's life is painless, okay? And you're not supposed to dwell on that shit. Sorry, curse, but it's just kind of true. All right, this has been enough of a rant, but I think that it's a good rant. It's one that many people need to hear, especially some of those people on that panel who I don't think are really helping kids as much as they claim to be. I haven't seen any real evidence of that, just some anecdotal stuff. It's hard to go dig too much into that without getting too personal into the lives of minors, so don't do that. But I have a different opinion on exactly why there has been much fewer suicides in the Newberg High School, and I don't think it has anything at all to do with the Wellness Center. Just my personal opinion. Anyway, I'm going to head out. I hope you guys got something out of this. See you in the next video.